Welcome, everyone, to this session on to plant or not to plant, unveiling the impact of conservation in local areas. To give a brief introduction, To Plant or Not to Plant is Wetlands International's initiative that challenges the popular trend of mangrove planting, advocating for a more effective approach of creating favorable conditions for natural growth. Their publication explores the crucial question to plant or not to plant, as they aim to contribute the best practices in mangrove restoration. This session is led by the Global Landscapes Forum Mindanao chapter. My name is Aman, and I am the project assistant for the Blue Carbon program at Oceanus Conservation. On behalf of our entire team, we are sending out a huge welcome to you all. In this session, we will hear about the work and insights of a mangrove expert, a mangrove scientist, and a mangrove practitioner from all over the world to share their best practices and lessons learned when it comes to restoration. This will be an open discussion in celebration of International Mangrove Day. We will have an introduction from Ms. Camille Rivera, the co-founder and director of Oceanus Conservation. Then we will also hear from our speakers, Dr. Rupesh Bomia, Ms. Agatha Bedi, and Mr. Roberto Cadodoy Balyan. To start us off, let us welcome Ms. Camille Rivera.
Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are listening in this world. So we want to welcome to our second session as a GLFx Mindanao chapter. I am Camille Rivera, and I lead Oceanus Conservation, which is a nonprofit organization working on conservation and restoration of the remaining blue carbon habitats in the Philippines. So we also created a chapter under the Global Landscapes Forum, hence the GLFx Mindanao, where we share practices and learn from each other. So, to plant or not to plant is a question where it's not often discussed when we do restoration initiatives. We come across different organizations that are forced to plant, even if it's not the correct areas or the correct species, or somehow do not need restoration at all. So today, we delve deep into the question that is becoming increasingly pertinent in our time. Should we focus on conservation or restoration in our local areas? Both are essential facets of environmental care. Yet the complexities associated with each can be confusing and overwhelming, especially with the increasing worldwide trend of 30% increased cover by 2030. If an area only has 100 hectares of mangroves, they need to restore 30 hectares. However, some areas are not conducive for planting. So today, we will navigate these waters together, gaining insights, sharing knowledge, and clarifying our perspectives. So our webinar today is not just a discussion, it's an exploration of this narrative and a guide to authoring it effectively, meaningfully, and sustainably. So our event today has three significant objectives. The first is awareness raising. So we have with us distinguished mangrove experts from all over the world, also in the Philippines, who will shed light on the importance of conservation and restoration, not just in their global importance, but specifically in their relevance to local areas. Their insights will underscore the benefits these practices bring to ecosystems, biodiversity, and community well-being, thereby emphasizing the urgency and significance of taking action. Secondly, this webinar will act as a platform for knowledge exchange. So we aim to foster a comprehensive understanding of the successes and failures associated with restoration projects. So you will hear firsthand from those who have orchestrated successful initiatives and learn from their experiences. Equally, we hope to know the reasons behind unsuccessful attempts, turning them into invaluable lessons for future endeavors. And we have to acknowledge these failures as this will guide restoration practitioners to reinvent the wheel to best practices. And lastly, we are all about fostering partnerships and collaborations. Our goal is to create supportive network that enhances the implementation of local nature-based initiatives. So we encourage you to interact, share your resources and ideas, and perhaps even lay the groundwork for new alliances. So today's webinar is more than a gathering of like-minded individuals. It is, in fact, the International Mangroves Day, and it's a collective journey toward understanding the impact of our decisions on the environment and how best we can contribute to the preservation and restoration of ecosystems. So by the end of our session, we hope that you will not only have deepened your understanding, but also be inspired to take action that aligns with your community's needs and goals. So let's begin this journey together. Let's discuss, let's debate, share, and learn. Together, let's answer the question, to plant or not to plant. To get to know our chapter better, what better way to show this by sharing a short video? Thank you, and I'm eager for the fruitful discussions ahead.
Thank you so much, Miss Camille. Now I would like to ask everyone who has questions to add them to the chat, and my colleagues and I will acknowledge your questions and will answer them directly there. So a lot of organizations and groups have been exploring the significance of conservation and restoration efforts in their local areas, understanding the importance of these practices and their impact on the environment. But the question here is, when is planting considered the most effective solution for restoration efforts, and when should planting mangroves be avoided? So to answer these questions, we will be having a roundtable of discussions and presentations and a brief conversation with mangrove experts, scientists, and practitioners. And I would like to invite Dr. Rupesh, Miss Agatha, and Sir Roberto on the screen with me. Hi, Dr. Rupesh. Hi, Miss
Hello.
Agatha. We were waiting for Kadodoy here. So here's Mr. Roberto Kadodoy from KGMC.
Hi.
Welcome, everyone. It's great to see
Hi,
you
hello.
all.
Hello, everyone.
So before we proceed, I would like to ask our speakers to introduce yourselves to our audience and a brief background on the work that you do. We can start with Dr. Rupesh and Miss Agatha and then Kadodoy.
Thank you very much. First of all, let me wish everyone a very happy International Day for Mangrove Conservation. I am delighted to be part of this group and looking forward for, as Camille said, discussion, deliberation, learning from each other, sharing stories and whatnot. So I'm very excited. My name is Rupesh Pomia. I work as a scientist with C4 Aircraft, which is based in Indonesia, and I am part of. Oh, am I muted?
Yeah, we can hear you now, Dr. Rupesh.
Okay. So my name is Rupesh Pomia. I work as a scientist with C4 Aircraft, which is based in Indonesia. And as a part of a small team, we work on wetlands, and with a special focus on coastal wetlands, and mangroves form an important part. We do provide scientific evidence in terms of research and data by getting more in situ understanding of the mangrove ecosystem, how they are responding to climate change or different biophysical factors, and then try to provide the scientific information to translate into some of the management interventions, including restoration, conservation, and other topics such as blue carbon, carbon credits, and so on and so forth. So that's, I guess, enough for my introduction. I look forward to learn more in this gathering. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rupesh. Now we can proceed to Miss Agatha.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Happy International Day of Mangroves. My name is Agatha Bedi. I'm from the Geospatial Database Office of the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, or DNR. So I've been working on mangrove-related projects for more than 5 years now. And I have graduated in Master's in Management of Forest Ecosystems in Tropical Countries in the University of Montpellier in France. And now I'm currently working in DNR GDO office. So the GDO is just, actually it's quite a new office. It was newly created just 6 months ago. It was an office that was created to map, monitor, and evaluate natural resources of the country, and also conservation and reforestation efforts. So later on, I will be discussing some case studies related to mangroves, and I can't wait. So thank you for inviting me here.
We can't also wait to hear that, Miss Agatha. Thank you for that. And now, Mr. Roberto Cadodoy Balyon.
Hi, hello everyone. Good afternoon here in the Philippines. Also, good day to our opinions here in our virtual. And I am Roberto Balyon Cadodoy here in the Philippines, fellow mangrove conservation and a fisherman association leaders. Later, I can talk about more on mangroves. Thank you very much.
Thank you to all our speakers. We can't wait to understand the mangrove ecosystem and how we can relate to conservation and restoration efforts and your best practices that you will show, and also the lessons learned that you have gained from the years that you have experienced working on mangrove restoration and conservation. So thank you so much again. And now I would like to take this moment to take a photo up with our speakers and our participants while everyone is here. And I would also like to request everyone to use the Zoom background if you have. And also, if your bandwidth permits, please turn on your cameras to see the beautiful faces of our audience right now. So our team will take the photo. So is everyone here? Please turn on your cameras. Okay. Okay, there are two pages right now. So please remain smiling so that we can capture your beautiful smile. So for the first page, 1, 2, 3. Okay, for the second page, okay, please turn on your cameras. Okay, maybe some can't open their cameras, but let's take the photo. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Okay, we have a third page. Okay, another one. 1, 2, 3. Okay, thank you so much to our audience. It's great to see you all. in this International Mangrove Day celebration. And also, we will be providing e-certificates for the participants via email after the event. So I'm sure that you want to get to know more about our speakers and the work that they do. But before we officially begin, let us first have a series of questions for the audience. So the questions will be sent as a poll that will flash on your screens. And in relation to our topic on to plant or not to plant, here are some questions to get to know our audience better. So are you ready for the questions? Okay, here it is. So for the question number 1, how many times have you joined a mangrove planting activity? Okay, so we have 3 choices here. So you could answer them now, and we will see on how many times did you join a mangrove planting activity throughout your lifetime. Okay, we're still waiting for other participants to answer our poll. Okay, so here it is, the result. So 59% have joined a mangrove planting activity 1 to 5 times, and others joined 10 times above. Wow, that's a lot of mangrove planting activity. So how many mangroves did you planted already? So maybe an entire forest already. So for the second question, okay, just a moment. Here it is. So for this second question, did you receive any training before the planting activity? Is it a yes or a no? Okay, we're still waiting for the answers of our audience. Okay, so a lot of you guys have been trained before the planting activity, and 33% of our participants have not been trained before the planting activity. So we will get to know more about the best practices and what species to plant during mangrove restoration in the correct mangrove zones. Okay, for our third question in relation to the second question for those who have been trained. Okay, so our third question. In just a moment. Okay, so here it is. Do you have an idea on what species to plant in a specific zone? Is it a yes, a no, or you're not sure? Okay, so 70% of us knows the correct zonation of our mangrove, and we'll get to know more about that once our speakers will have their presentations later. So for our last question, for this last question, we want to know how you will approach this situation. And when you encounter a healthy mangrove forest with natural regeneration, which would you prefer to do? Conduct a planting initiatives with friends and community, or leave the mangrove forest as it is? Okay. So which would you prefer to do? Leave it as it is, or plant more mangroves in the mature mangrove forest? Okay, here's the answer. So 87%, a lot of you guys answered leave it as it is. So why would we leave it as it is? And we will know more about that later. And 13% of you guys said we should conduct planting initiatives with friends and communities. So it's incredible to see all of your responses and thank you for all your answers. It is great to know that there are people volunteering for mangrove planting and also knowing the species in the specific area. But today we will learn more about the best practices on mangroves as the speakers will now present their work. And in relation to our last question, uh, when is the best time to plant or not to plant? So now let us begin the round table of presentations. And I know that our speakers have a lot to share with our audience, but I would also like to remind our speakers of the 5 to 7 minutes time limit to have more time for the question and answer portion later. So to start us off is Dr. Rupesh. He is a scientist specializing in tropical freshwater swamps and coastal systems at C4 Aircraft in Indonesia. So let us welcome Dr. Rupesh, and you may now share your presentation. So here it is. Hi, Dr. Rupesh.
Hello, can you
Okay.
hear me and see my presentation?
Yes, Dr. Rupesh, you're audible
Okay.
and we can see your presentation.
Thank you. So first of all, again, a warm welcome to everyone, and thank you for this opportunity to be part of this group. What I'm most excited to share about is, this sheer energy in the room with young people and then people who are doing work in the ground. Sometimes as a scientist, we as in people like me think so much about data and information and statistical significance and whatnot. But these kind of engagements are very good opportunity for learning for me. So I'm also here to learn a lot, although Kai was saying I'm an expert and so on and so forth, but that also comes with learning that happens from everywhere. So thank you for this opportunity. And it is the biggest question in today's time when mangroves are a center stage in terms of our climate change adaptation and mitigation strategies, to plant or not to plant. So I'm really glad and very happy to see this topic. I'll share some experience or some past learnings from what we have been doing. And to get us started, we don't really need much introduction for this group, why mangroves are important. But just to start us off, I thought it's a nice cartoon diagram which shows why in any coastal location, these areas, these ecosystems are incredibly important, not for sustenance of life, protection of biodiversity, providing habitat, but also increasingly due to climate change, we have so many increased intensity of severe storms and hurricanes and cyclones. And these mangroves provide the protection services while at the same time reducing the greenhouse gases. So that in today's very much value economic valuation kind of world, we tend to see any ecosystem or any natural thing with what kind of value and services it provides. And of course mangroves are no different, and this cartoon here shows what kind of variety of services and values that they provide, which are important for, of course, human survival and communities, but also very important for maintaining the structural functional diversity of coastal ecosystem, which is sustaining life, biodiversity, fisheries, and whatnot. And this is just to capture the whole slew of those ecosystem services. That's why mangrove and coastal ecosystems are important. And we should think about the ideas that we're talking about, conserving them, and if they are degraded, restoring them. Globally, mangrove ecosystems are well distributed. More than 100 countries contain mangrove ecosystem, but 75% of global mangrove extent is found only in 15 countries. So it is important worth noting that some of the important topics that we are discussing today will make a big impact, even if we are able to make some change in a small area or country and practices in those areas. To just give you a little bit of regional focus, this is a map from Global Mangrove Watch. So globally, there is about 150,000 kilometers square of mangroves, out of which about 50% of that mangrove is found in Southeast Asia. Again, very important because our audience and people in this group are more coming from this area. So what we discuss, what we talk today about mangroves and coastal sustainability is important because that's where most of the mangroves lie. And I do not have a slide to show, but that's where also mangrove diversity is also high in terms of vegetation or species coverage and species diversity. This area is the hotspot for that. However, there has been a declining trend, but nonetheless, mangroves have been lost. And globally, about 3.4% of mangroves have been lost in last decade. And there have been some scientific studies assessing where the maximum losses have been globally. And this map here, coming from a paper last year, shows those hotspots where the losses have happened. And the red or the warmer colors show those hotspots of loss. And if you zoom into Southeast Asia region, you will say that out of the global mangrove loss, about 50% of that global net loss happened in this area. Why I'm showing this is because when we talk about restoration and conservation, it is very important to know what is the motivation, because this is area which is experiencing more loss. So this immediately becomes an important topic to discuss. But how do you go about it? And there have been very many approaches to understand what are causing these mangrove losses. We call them drivers of mangrove loss, and they can be divided into two categories. One is environmental drivers, which includes climate change and extreme events, basically things which may have human activities may have an impact, maybe an indirect impact, but there are limited things that we can really do to control. And then, as you would understand, these are anthropogenic drivers, which is where activities that are directly carried out by humans, our society, the policies, and we can do something about it. Both of these sets of drivers, anthropogenic and environment, they interact. They do not exist in isolation, and that combined effect, and very often the combined effect is more detrimental, results into mangrove degradation and loss. So it is not just complete loss, even degradation, the ecosystem ecological quality also have an impact on mangrove ecosystem services. So we need to see what those drivers are, what are the underlying pressures that are driving those drivers, which is important, as will come clear, to have that understanding when we talk about restoration or conservation, because those are the underlying causes. If you don't address them, then sometimes your interventions may not be very successful. This is another map showing this percent loss in Southeast Asia between 2000 to 2012. And this paper also discusses some of the reasons behind this mangrove loss. And I just highlighted the case of Philippines here, where in terms of Southeast Asia, it's less than other countries, but still in top 5. So I was really very smiling when I saw the title of this talk. And this is an open question for everyone. It is not me to answer or one person to answer, because it's something that we have to collectively decide and discuss. What I will share a few examples from some of these activities from India. And this is to just give you a variety what people and communities have done in case of the severe event. And I'm taking these examples from Sundarbans, which is one of the largest contiguous mangrove forests, but also very populated. A lot of communities living there and very vulnerable communities due to climate change, sea level rise, retreating or eroding shorelines. These communities have faced brunt of nature in all forms. And they have been promoted through various NGOs as well as government to plant mangroves. It is a different story whether that mangrove plantation or restoration was done with a scientific understanding or in a manner whether it will survive. But what I'm trying to say is that there has been a lot of these activities going around, because that seems to be the only way to restore back and have the protection in our areas. This is another of that event where a cyclone prone village in Charkhali, they the women, basically, if you see in this picture, all of them are women. So they came together, and it was a little bit of empowering in a way that whole village community come together to save their village. And because the mangroves are lost, as you see this area, and it's fast eroding. Again, in from eastern coast, there is people who have come together in terms of activism and being very progressive, not even getting any support from the government or forest department, but just organize these activities to protect themselves against these change realities. So with these few examples, what I want to just leave with some thoughts and points for consideration, that to have, and then this is coming from more restoration side. We will have more discussion on the main point that Camille raised about whether restoration or conservation, what to do where. But this is just coming from the restoration side. Even when you decide for a site, community participation is very important. How those mangroves, where the plantation will happen, and then if there are direct benefits, who will have the ownership and stewardship of that area. And then very important to have good coordination and information sharing between different arms of government. In many countries, many places, mangroves unfortunately fall in that gray area where no one knows who really owns them and who has the ability to make any change. So it will be really good to think about those realities and then adapt accordingly. Of course, having availability of financial resources can ensure that that the protection or the conservation even after restoring does happen. And then linked to those topics are improving the governance, improving some of the institutional linkages of coordination, and then we do, as a scientist, I cannot help but to say that we need to have some monitoring in terms of what is going on, how things are changing, because we are dealing with a dynamic environment and ecosystem, which is always responding to change. And we need to know what those changes are, whether in terms of fresh water availability in that estuary, or there is a pollution, and so on and so forth. And then we need to have support in terms of capacity building of people who are working on the ground, a right level of education, awareness, engagement, and then thinking a little bit creatively out of box. So with these kind of points of consideration, we can, I believe, at least be successful in our objectives, whether to protect, whether to restore. But whatever we choose to do, the ultimate goal should be that whatever we are doing is the right approach in that location, and that approach leads to success. So again, I mentioned this communication, outreach, and engagement is a strong element for that. So with that, I end my talk, and will love to hear and learn from others and participate in discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rupesh. I can really relate with the points of consideration, especially community participation. It's really important that we are aligned with the community's goals, and also align the restoration efforts with their current livelihood and the socio-economic factors that they're currently ongoing right now. And also with regards with the coordination with LGU, it's also important, really based from experience, the alignment of our goals and visions for that local area that we want to restore or we want to protect. Because one instance, in one of our sites in Caguait, there has been a road widening, but that mangrove area is already protected and was considered to be owned by the community. However, the government still pursued the road widening for an event. And luckily, we have Miss Agatha from DNR. If you have questions like those, Miss Agatha specializes in the restoration and management of coastal wetlands, and she currently works in the office of the Undersecretary for Integrated Environmental Science of the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, or DNR. And Miss Agatha, welcome again, and you may now share your presentation.
Hello, everyone. I hope everyone can hear me and see my screen.
Yes, Miss Agatha.
Okay, perfect. So again, I work in Geospatial Database Office, which is a very new office within DNR. I just wanted to say also, I'm not a GIS specialist, but I am learning. And but I am surrounded by GIS specialists in this team now. So for today, I'll be presenting our case studies. And before that, I'll be covering, wait, let's see, the basic of mangroves generally. So Dr. Rupesh has already mentioned the ecosystem services of mangroves and ecological functions. This is just, a quick definition of mangroves. I'm sure everyone is aware already. It's a forest ecosystem characterized by trees, ferns, and palms. You can find it in sandy, muddy, coralline areas. It's in coastline and riverbanks, and highly adapted species. In fact, it can tolerate salt and harsh environments thanks to their certain functions. For example, here, these are the common trees with different kind of root systems we can find in the Philippines. So there are pencil and cone-like roots, which are pneumatophores. There are stilt roots, knee roots, and plant roots. These roots are specialized to filter out salt water for gas exchange also, and for stability, especially in very harsh environments. So the first pencil roots and cone-like roots, they belong to the trees of Avicennia species. Cone-like roots belongs to the Soneracha species. These are two species we can find at the seafront. The third is the stilt roots, which belong to the Rhizophora species, which are very common in the Philippines, especially in planting programs, which we'll talk about later on. And the fourth one is Bruguiera species, which have funny-looking knee roots that are similar to pencil-like roots, but it actually creates a loop and goes back underground the root system. And finally, we have the plank roots, which are basically specialized for stability and absorbing nutrients. In the Philippines, we have three very common mangroves. It's Avicennia species with the pencil roots, Soneracha species with the cone-like roots, and Rhizophora species with the stilt roots. I think everyone, basing on the survey, everyone seems to be very aware of the mangrove zonation, and good job. But so I won't have to explain this in detail, I guess, but just briefly, explain the mangrove forest, mangroves in general, has to be planted in the upper intertidal and middle intertidal areas. So this is the natural zonation. You can see the root systems. There's the stilt roots just behind the pencil roots or cone-like roots, so Soneracha or Avicennia. But in reality, so we are all aware, in the Philippines, a lot of planting activities actually look like this. We would plant beyond the designated area, which is the upper intertidal, middle intertidal. We end up planting in the sun flats, mud flats, seagrass, and coral reefs. So this results to really high mortality rate. So low survival of mangroves because these are not species adapted to the area. And if they do survive, usually they are stunted mangroves. There's no natural regeneration. They also threat different ecosystem habitats, and their resiliency is quite low when it comes to adapting to climate change. So this is where DNR comes now. We are aware that there's plenty room for improvement, and the DNR is basically addressing the low survival rate through capacity training programs, distribution of technical bulletins on how to properly plant mangroves. And this is where geospatial database comes in. So basically here, this is the most recent project I have worked on. I just chose a random example of Quezon. We can see a mangrove cover in this area. This, by the way, is information from NAMRIA, the National Mapping central agency. And the National Greening Program information is from the Forest Management Bureau. So we collected the data and we analyzed the data, which I will be presenting later on. So the green represents the national greening programs where mangroves were planted in 2013-14. So we'll just focus on the National Green Program and zoom in. So within the NGP in a certain place in Quezon, we were able to study the different the results within that NGP program. So the green represents the increased mangroves over time. The fleshy color represents neutral, that has not changed. Red represents decrease, which we cannot see, thankfully, there aren't here in this NGP patch. And lastly, which we'll be focusing on, the non-visible NGP results. So the pink represents areas where mangroves were planted, but basing on the satellite imagery, we cannot see any tree cover or canopy. So we'll focus on the non-visible NGP results, specifically this area. So using this method, we were able to analyze how come why there aren't any tree canopy. I'm guessing you have an idea. First, for example, is if you focus on the fish ponds, most likely the mangroves were planted in the lower intertidal areas, which I have mentioned a while ago, are not mangrove suitable areas for mangroves. It's also possible they didn't alter the tidal hydrology, so they were planted in flooded areas. These are just, of course, assumptions. So please, we didn't do any ground truthing. For all you know, there was a typhoon that wiped out the seedlings. There were other issues on the ground. But for now, we will just stick with what we can see from the satellite images. So number one, most likely the mangroves didn't grow after a few years due to the tidal hydrology, which was altered due to the fish ponds. Second, they were planted in the coastal areas. Most likely, it's again a lower intertidal area. And the third, most likely the same with number two, but also it could be, aside from it being a lower intertidal area or subtidal area, the water can be too strong. It depends on the substrate and also depends on the species planted. So this is just one example that we can do all over the Philippines. We can systematically study the NGP results from increased, decreased, neutral, and non-visible NGP results. And from this, hopefully, we can craft policies or management practices like, okay, we don't plant here in this area because this is not a mangrove zone. Or if you plant here, you have to restore the tidal hydrology. So this is just an example that we've been working on. Other examples that GDO has been working on, this was just yesterday, with the information provided by thinking machines of the fish ponds, we were able to map fish pond areas within vulnerable communities in the Philippines to sea level rise and flooding. So one example is Manila Bay. The red represents sea level rise and the blue represents the fish pond. So what is the connection with the fish ponds? By just visualizing it, we can see that we can try to prioritize certain fish pond areas for mangrove reversion. Reversion to mangroves, definitely, for us coastal protection in these areas. So the same with Iloilo and Negros Occidental, we spotted thanks to the data provided by MSI, we know where the areas vulnerable to sea level rise, and now we can prioritize which fish ponds eventually to rehabilitate for coastal mangrove protection. So those are just examples. If you want more information, you can look at the website of DNR. From once you click the website, you have to look for the geospatial database area, and from there we will be able to show different use cases the geospatial database has been working on. Those are just some examples. These are our partners that we are working with to create the maps. And that's all. Thank you very much. I know I passed away my time, but if you have any questions, we can discuss it later on. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Miss Agatha Betty. It's great to know that we already have a map on which areas or which mangrove areas can be rehabilitated. So that's one good thing to know for us conservationists and mangrove restoration practitioners. And it really, one point is the mangrove zonation is really important to capacitate our communities or any restoration efforts to learn the mangrove zonation for a better survival of our restored mangrove areas. And speaking of better survival of mangrove areas or mangrove restoration efforts, we have here Mr. Roberto Cadodoy Balyon, who has been a mangrove practitioner and has been very successful on propagating Soneracha alba seedlings. And he is a community environmentalist from Concepcion, Cabasalan, Mindanao, and has led this community in preserving the coastal environment and mangrove forests. So, Mr. Roberto Cadodoy, the floor is yours. Hi, Cadodoy. I think you're on mute. Okay, let's just wait for Cadodoy to unmute his microphone. Okay, so guys, while waiting for Kadodoy, do you have any comments or ideas or questions to our speakers, Dr. Rupesh and Miss Agatha? You can directly ask them in our chat and we will acknowledge those questions later. Okay, so Kadodoy. Okay, here.
Hi, hello.
Yes, Kadodoy, we can
Hello.
hear you.
Yes, you can hear you now, everyone. Okay, thank you very much. Great. So, before I go on my presentation, also to share about our experience here about mangrove restoration and protection here in the Philippines, especially southern Philippines in Zamboanga, Sibugay. Would like to thanks first to our one of our partner here in the Oceano, so Sir Manuel, Ma'am Sweet, and especially Ma'am Marian. Thank you very much for inviting me to share also our programs and project, especially the mangrove restoration. Here also in our area, I will share to everyone what our experience and also our really wanted to have more mangrove plants here in our area, because before in Zamboanga Sibugay is full or much cover of mangroves. Then the resources, the fishes, the crabs, so are very also abundant. But later, because of the vanishing of the mangrove has converted into different uses, especially fish pond really, and before we can say that fish pond is bad, but before because of this activity, so while the mangrove covers declining, also our catch as a small fishers community also declining, and that's the beginning of our hardship, and the fisher folk began being poor in our area. So that's why until now we are really concentrating on these activities and this advocacy to really plant more mangroves in our area. So that's maybe to really bring back the resources that we wanted to since it's before in the area. So this is the real situation. I see I cannot run my see. But first, I want to know that the big role here is the role of the community in terms of coastal resource management. It was started on our small association, which is the Kapunong Sagang may mga isla sa Concepcion. Sa Concepcion was organized in 1986, and the main objective really of our association, of our members, is really to bring back our mangroves that since because we seen before that because of mangrove, so our fish stock are really very abundant even in the mount of the river. Even the river months we can have plenty of catch because of the existence of bass mangrove. But later it is really not really good. And because of this also partners who are helping us to our association, so we began to have more knowledge, more technical skills, and more what we say conscious about what really the importance of the mangroves. So we began our project, but it's not really it's all about mangroves before, because our aims is to really reduce our the poverty incidence in that area. But we seen that the only secret or the only way of bring back this to really bring back also the coverage of the mangroves in our area. So at the start we really as our first two speakers said earlier, that really the planting of mangroves is really not easy, no, because it's really hard if you are not really as have especially resources like what we experience, no. But by trying to our best to really plant at the start mangroves even without any single centavos help coming as in any institution before in 1980s. But constantly we planted mangroves, and we observed gradually our mangroves from one seedlings it became 50 hectares after a couple of a decade. Then later we observed also that our planted mangrove is not really 100% have a good survival. It's also maybe 30 to 40%. So we trying ourselves to become what really the good idea, what good practice or method to really plant more mangroves in our locality. And we invented this Suneracia alba pagat-patsit propagation. So we then, because on this we are now planting started not really to gather more wildlings to plant the planting site, but we started it really from seeds of apagatpat and miyapi to more have planting materials to plant in our suitable site at our second speaker said earlier. That's our experience. And at not really after we planted mangroves, we got also a knowledge from our partners that really mangroves not only protect our coastline, our sea waves, and our storm surge and strong wind, but also it really, according to the study, it really also protect our corals and seagrasses. That's why we are very happy, because also corals and corals can give us another source of income in terms of because corals and seagrasses, we all know that this is also a habitat and a source and breeding ground of our marine species. So that's why we included it into our program, that really not only mangroves but also seagrasses and corals, and not only seagrasses, corals, and mangroves, but really we have also a program that to reduce and to minimize solid waste in our area, because yes, we observe that our mangroves there is very healthy and very good to see, but in the long run we observe that also solid waste can really distract or has is also one factor, while mangrove did not really good in terms of growing or protection, because more garbage which is produced by local community. So that's why solid waste or coastal cleanup is also included in our mangrove program and restoration. And this is the importance of mangroves, as I said earlier, really protecting us from strong wind and give us different marine resources. And this is why not to plant mangrove or really to plant mangrove. This is our realization anyway, the significant really of mangroves in our community, because in this slide at which you can see it shows that without this mangrove, so the food chain cycle is not really happen in the area. So that's the mangrove really important. So what that's why we really encourage to more to people to plant more mangrove to participate in this activity, because especially the coastal communities in the world, not only in the Philippines and Asia, but because you know, if you want it, you can have really participating on this and to protect really the how to plant and protect our mangroves, the resources in this area, because of the one mangrove alone. So it could be a chain of different you know, in this presentation, as I said, I cannot really explain well, but you can imagine how does this happen in the area if it has more mangroves to plant or to protect. And this is also the benefits. I not really, because we all know on this, the benefits of for the human. Also, it is discussed earlier by our two speakers. And this is also the after we planted more mangroves, so there's a lot of resources could we and can we harvest, and even an aquaculture, sea farming. So we have because we have a lot of fingerlings to have and gathered, and also you have a different partner and they give us some skills and knowledge about sea farming. Also, not really our source of income, not really or the whole day is coming from the catch or the fishing, but also we have an alternative income or other income is like such as like this as sea farming, like lapu-lapu, oyster in our area, especially in our different community in Zamboanga, Sibugay, and also sustainable livelihood and enterprise. And one of also who those our members of coastal community who are doing really the source of their income is derived from before from the mangrove. We cut it and then they're going to sell it to become have a livelihood. But in this initiative, instead we organize them into an association. Then we trying ourselves to help this community to have another income, not to stop their old source of livelihood, which is cutting of mangroves. Yes, through the help of partners and line agencies of our government. And this is also one of our best initiative here. Then because our association become known and in our area, in our province, and especially in our locality, so other people, other coastal community wanted to join us, but our membership, if they wanted to really join us to our association, we cannot accept money as other membership. Instead, we ask to them to plant mangroves at least 100 to 500 seedlings to then that's their membership. After they planted those mangrove, they will become our part of our association or members. That's until now, that's our initiative to really to feel the people why we did this, and what really the reason why we have to plant more and protect mangroves in our area for what. So that's really our the most significant effort that we have, and even before and even until now. So we're trying to have more partners like this to, and also Oceanos, to become really more mangroves, more community, more partners to become this as to become one of this advocacy, no? And that's all. To now, thank you. As for now, thank you very much to our listeners, our followers, and good luck. And we have more to share later through your question, if any. Thank you very much, and good afternoon.
Thank you so much, Kadodoy. And it's really amazing, despite the challenges that you have faced in planting and propagating Sonaracha, you were very successful in doing that. And it really created a chain of positive change when you have planted from one Sonaracha seedling to now very wide 50 hectares of Sonaracha, a mangrove forest, I mean. And we can see the interconnectedness of us human beings to our nature. And when we protect and restore, we could really benefit from it based from Kadodoy's experience and his organization. And aside from that, the coastal protection and the food security and another source of livelihood that these mangrove areas provide us is really important. So thank you so much again for that, Kadodoy, and to all our speakers. And now, we can begin the panel discussion, and I would like to request our panel speakers. But before that, I would like to request Kadodoy to please stop sharing your screen so that we could proceed to our next part. Okay, let's just wait a moment. So if you have any questions to our speakers, you could directly input them in the chat, and our speakers will answer them directly there. So now we can begin our panel discussion with our speakers. So I would like to pose a question. Having heard all of your practices, are there any specific strategies or approaches that have proven to be more effective in conservation or restoration that can be more engaging to communities?
If there are participants are willing to ask in Tagalog, it's really good because I'm not really good in English, but there's also some of our partners as a translator.
Sure, Kadodoy, no worries. So if you could ask in Filipino, Kadodoy would love to answer that. And for our speakers, our first question is this: are there specific strategies or approaches that have been proven to be more effective in conservation or restoration that can be engaging with the communities? So Kadodoy, would you like to go first? So what specific strategies or approaches that have been proven to be more effective in engaging your local community, especially your organization?
Yes, thank you very much. As I said, all the time when I have a sharing in other areas in here in the Philippines, and especially in my local area, I really encourage them in planting mangroves. If we will not really protect and plant more mangroves here in our area, so what will happen to us in the future? Because as a small fisherman, we have not really another treasure like or any resources or source of livelihood just in that area, no? In the coastal area, especially in the mangrove, especially and I'm emphasizing really to this community, or to community, especially coastal community, to the small scale fisheries, that if the people in the urban areas and in the city, they have their own banks to deposit, then to withdraw in every time that they need for their basic needs daily. But in opposite, we are the fisher folk is not, no, we have no banks like in the city. But don't you know, our banks is a very huge or a very big banks. We don't know that the mangroves, the ocean, the mud flat, the seagrasses, the corals, this is our banks. But what we done our banks, we are destroying on it. So what can happen really in this bank? What will that what happening on this bank that we have? So we are destroying. So that's now I always encouraging to them. So we are really to restore, redeposit these banks. That's so that we can have money or any we can a sustainable resources to withdraw anytime if we have the need of our children to stay to school, to repair our house, especially our daily needs, our food, our shelter, our clothes. So that's really significant on this learning. And thank you very much on this. We can share our own experience. And also, lastly, I always remind the people, if you really wanted to grow more mangroves, you plant first in your mind, in your heart, the mangrove, the seeds of mangrove. It can be planted first in our heart, in our mind, because if the mangroves cannot really grow in our mind, in our hearts, so also the mangroves planted there in the soil did not grow well. So that's the most important. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Kadodoy. And now, Miss Agatha, do you have any addition to that idea from Kadodoy?
For us, GDO is relatively new, so we weren't able or not yet able to start to engage with the communities. But I think it's we can learn from different, best practices. Basically, what we're doing now, we're creating maps or use case, and then we are relaying it to the regional officers. The regional officers would have to relay to the CENRO, PENRO, provincial level, and then hopefully also they would work with the local communities who have been planting these mangroves. And then through that, there will be it's not only a top-down approach, but a bottom-up approach at the same time, everyone updating the map eventually. So I guess we should aim for that, a proper cascading of the maps we are creating here in DNR, and how to integrate the inputs until the lower level before the final application for mangrove rehabilitation.
Thank you so much, Ms. Agatha. It's really about meeting halfway with the government and also working together with the communities. How about you, Dr. Rupesh? Do you have anything to add?
Yes, there are a few things, but I guess these are on similar lines. What has been said. One important thing when we're thinking about communities, particularly in coastal areas, what Roberto was saying, the relationship and dependence, they are our banks, but we are not taking good care of that. So it's that sustainable livelihood comes into play. How can communities connect to their actions with some kind of incentive? It cannot be always just like direct sums of money, but in terms of connecting those connections, how it impacts their livelihood, how it impacts their health, how it impacts their nutrition. We did a very interesting study in Indonesia where we compared some areas where the community is living nearby a protected or a well-conserved mangrove area and an area where they have lost all mangroves, and we looked at the nutrition and health of their family members, particularly young kids. So the communities which are living in the vicinity of healthy mangroves, they were getting a lot of their food resource which they didn't have to go and buy from the market, but just in this vicinity they were catching, and the health and the nutrition and the development of young kids was better in those areas without knowing. There was no earlier studies and whatnot, but this was the benefit they are getting. So that is there. We need to to then engage with them, and the question is how we can engage better, is by being proactive in our communication, in awareness, and then important is to give them a sense of empowerment in terms of that they do count, their voice counts. So whenever, very often, where these restoration activities or these kind of intervention doesn't succeed, is because that link is missing. The community has not been approached, they are not been taken part in this co-designing and intervention, and there is not a sense of ownership and empowerment. So if we can address that through various dialogues, through being proactive, through making all the right kind of, giving right signals, I think we can advance this further. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Rupesh. And a follow-up on the first question. How can we promote mangrove conservation in areas that do not need any planting? And are there best cases, that protects or incentivizes conservation? We can start with Dr. Rupesh.
Yeah, so this is very important, and unfortunately, not enough thought has gone that, because very often these decisions about whether to plant or conserve are often taken away from mangroves, if you can relate to. This is decided because their targets are already set. Government has some funds they want to do, and they want to show, oh, we have planted the mangroves. And as Camille was pointing, the metric should be survival of seedling or something else, but often it is not. It's just, okay, we planted in this particular fiscal year and we meet our quota and targets, and job done for that year. Unfortunately, that doesn't lead us further in this area. But what we can do is mapping could be a very good tool, what DNR is doing, to identifying, knowing what are those zones which are more vulnerable, and what are the zones which have lost mangroves in the past. So if we have that kind of even a national or a local or a regional map, and some area of estimation where we need more active interventions, areas which are already in some kind of conserved status, if they are part of some MPA or a national park and wildlife sanctuaries, if it is really degraded, then you really need interventions. Otherwise, if there is not a lot of pressure in that area, it will bounce back. Mangroves are my favorite kind of ecosystem, because they are resilient, they have capacity to bounce back. So we do not necessarily need intervention, but areas where there are still experiencing a lot of pressure, there is a lot of still those drivers I talked about, there you need intervention. And if you do a little analysis of those proximate and distance drivers, then you can decide, okay, we need active interventions, whether it needs to be in terms of plantation, and then you can talk about what species to plant, where to plant, and so on and so forth.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rupesh. I agree with that it is not just about the number of seedlings that was planted, but it's more of the number of seedlings that have survived. And also the map of DNR is very important for site selection, and also the suitable species that future conservation efforts and restoration efforts could plant in those areas. So thank you again, Dr. Rupesh. So I would like to pose this question to Ms. Agatha. So in terms of the National Greening Program planting sites, it was observed in some areas that mostly Rhizophora species are chosen over endemic species in the area. I would like to ask if we can improve the species selection and its planting in NGP sites. So this was a question from Jan of the Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources.
Thank you for that question. Actually, Rhizophora species is a native tree species. I know what you mean. How come we cannot use other species that are more suitable to the planting site? Actually, that is already being done, and we're trying to strengthen further those efforts. As I've mentioned a while ago, a technical bulletin was made a few years ago with in partnership of ERDB, Ecosystem Research Center of DNR, and BNB, Biodiversity Management Bureau. They created a task on how to plant, where to plant, and basically heeding the advice of mangrove experts, when it comes to science-based mangrove protocol. So there's that bulletin that we've been distributing to different agencies and office. Secondly, we've all been also conducting capacity training activities, strengthening partnerships with other NGOs on how to conduct mangrove, science-based mangrove planting. But of course, there's still a lot of room for improvement. And we are actively doing this. And the secretary herself, also of the DNR, has shown a lot of will also on to restore our mangroves and use science-based methods. So we're currently working on that now. Hopefully, with this map, we'll be able to dictate also what species to plant by step-by-step process, and which will be validated by Centro level or Pedro level. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you so much, Ms. Agatha. So it's really about strengthening efforts in capacitating communities and also putting science-based restoration methods in the spotlight so that a lot of communities may replicate the successful restoration efforts of different sites. And now, I have a question. How long does it take for the mangroves after planting to be self-sustaining? This question can be answered by any of our speakers. So how long does it take for the mangroves after planting to be self-sustaining?
I can start with that. We and I'm assuming self-sustaining means it matches to some level of natural mangrove. That's what I'm understanding what self-sustaining is. And with that kind of understanding, we did a more scientific literature meta-analysis where we pick up a lot of research which has been reported in scientific journal across the world, various restoration sites, and which have measured the growth of tree survival and what kind of biomass and all that. So we found that in about 20 to 25 years of time, a good restored site where the mangroves have survived and sort of followed the growth trajectory, they start to mimic a natural site. It also, but there are two key things to that. The starting point is important, like whether it's a restored site from a fish pond which has been abandoned and a lot of its natural conditions like hydrology and everything has been disrupted. So what is your start point? If it is really heavily degraded and everything is kind of broken in terms of its original structure and function, then the time period may be really long. But if your start point is not so bad, then in 20-25 years, the recovery happens. Also, what happens is that in terms of ecosystem services, there is not enough studies available where they have captured all the ecosystem services of a natural mangrove ecosystem. So the metrics are very limited. Like you may see that, okay, the forest looks nice, the density and vegetation of trees have been similar or reached to a similar stage, but it is not necessary. It is still have the same level of macrobenthos community, like whether the same crabs have come in these areas, whether you still have mud skippers or all kinds of fishes that you generally find in natural mangroves. So there we still need a lot of research to do, but at the very back of envelope calculations, I would say 50 to 20 years.
So it will take about 20 to 25 years for mangrove areas to be self-sustaining. So I would also like to hear from Kadodoy, gaano ba katagal after yung mangrove planting nyo na lumago yung mangrove area nyo, saka meron na kayong nakikitang growth at saka may benefits na din sa inyong community? Gaano ba katagal yung taon na inintay nyo para may makitang growth sa mangroves nyo?
Actually, Dr. Rope is right. It's a long process to become really to feel or to justify the benefit of the more benefits on mangrove. But that's Ma'am Agatha said earlier, it's really important and also defined Dr. Ropis. It's really important the roles of science in this area, and also I can say that in parallel with experience of the people who are really directly affected of those projects, no? and and I suggesting even before that, really if we are really have a joint effort, joint what we say a joint initiative, the graduate from the universities, University of the Philippines, or it's either graduated from Cambridge or any university outside, and also the graduate from the UAE. UAE means University of Actual Experience. We can do better. So, and in our experience also, as Dr. P said, in terms of how many years or how long that mangroves give us benefits, no, in terms of not the benefits in our own experience. The benefits really has a three. First benefits is the benefits of the as I said in my presentation, benefit first in the environment, like strong wind and storm surge. Second benefits is really the source of the ecosystem, like as a fisher folk, we need really daily income, which is coming from our fishing, no? We really have a daily income, which is we have really to fish every day to have an income. So that's really the a big role of one of the big role of the mangrove to give, because after in experience after 2 to 3 years, the crabs, the shells has begun to grow there inside and under the 3-year-old mangrove trees, and that's our experience. And the third benefits also is directly, but it's not suggested that everybody has to do it with to do this. The needs of the people to repair their houses, to not really that's a bad, but in our experience, say for example, we have 10 hectares of mangrove. It's really fully protected, and we counterparted in it another 1 to 2 hectares for our utilization to repair our houses for firewood, no? So that's why we can we can see that the people, the needs of the people in terms of food, so we can have direct designated area for them, not just cut everywhere. So that's the real situation on that. And lastly, and we can if we can really have really a true protection in our experience, because this bakawan or rhizopora, all kind of rhizopora species, is really prone for cutting after 3 to 10 years because of its good quality of lumber. Also, Sinorassia or pagat-patuan is also a prone of another cutting intention because it's a good quality of woods. But in our experience, this Abyssinia, all kinds of Abyssinia, if we can introduce and really protect to this kind of mangrove, it's really not a prone of cutting because of its quality. So that's why in abandoned fish pond, in our current projects, we encourage ourselves, our people, if that area is suitable for miapi, so maybe it might be good if we will plant more on miapi in that area, so that we reduce our patrolling and to ensure to reducing in the later the cutting of this species. So that's only our based on our experience.
Thank you so much again, Kadodoy, for your experience. As you said, University of Actual Experience on the mangrove restoration efforts that you have done. And it's great to see that for about around 20 years, you have seen the the benefits of the restored mangrove area that have provided with your community. And in the interest of time, we can only allow one more question from the audience before we give our speakers their last statement to plant or not to plant. So the question is from one of our audience. What is your perspective on state-driven mangrove planting projects, especially in remote coastal desert areas or artificial islands where no mangroves have existed previously? This as a means to offset carbon dioxide emissions in the context of blue carbon initiatives. So, Ms. Agatha or Dr. Rupesh, you may answer the question.
Ms. Agatha, you go first.
Okay, here in the Philippines, I think, is this the question related to land reclamation? I'm not sure. Artificial islands, yes. Planting mangroves on artificial islands. If I'm not mistaken, this is not common in the Philippines. Land reclamation are usually for development, building infrastructures. But I did see one example, specifically in Bataan and Manila Bay. They were able to do an artificial island by using the dredged sediments from the river to create that island. So it was very costly. I think it cost millions. This was conducted by the DPWH. And this is, I think, the first and last project. But it did very well. Mangroves were able to grow. So basically in that area, it's very costly. We don't do it because it's costly and it's not practical. But just to say remote coastal desert areas, for me, basically, each ecosystem is very important. Mudflats is as important as mangroves, and as much as possible, I try to discourage afforestation. No? But I guess in the end, it really depends on what the local communities want and need, and what are the urgent needs in that area. And that's just my part. You can go ahead, Dr. Rupesh.
Yeah, so I guess again a little bit important to understand the question. If these are really areas where nothing is growing, as they say, desert coastal areas, so you have to wonder what is the really need to plant mangroves there. And typically in cases where we prioritize, say, restoration, rehabilitation, we look for those signs where mangroves either are growing, like one or two seedling is coming up. That gives us an indication that, okay, there some seedlings can survive. But important thing is what we look is other hydrologic characteristics. What are the tidal amplitude? What are these things? And if these particular locations, which the question is mentioned, if none of these things are happening, then it will be a futile effort.
Thank you so much, panelists, for your very insightful contributions. Your expertise will undoubtedly inspire our audience to make informed decisions about nature-based initiatives in their local areas to be better equipped to make sound decisions that align with their community's needs and goals. And thank you again for those amazing and excellent insights. And one very final question, since we've heard from all of you your best practices and lessons on the mangrove restoration and conservation efforts that you have done. In your expert opinion, we go back to our title, to plant or not to plant. We can start with Dr. Rupesh and Miss Agatha and then Kadodoy.
I would say that we need to plant because the fact I showed mangrove cover loss and these ecosystems are too important to just leave on their own. So we do need to plant, but where we plant, what we plant, how we plant, And all those things have to come into place. Who are involved, who are participating in that decision making, all of these needs to play a role if we really want a successful outcome, and the impacts have to be favorable. So to plant, but with a lot of conscience and lot of consultation.
As for me, can I say it depends? It depends if it's a fish pond with altered tidal hydrology. I know it's a lot, like what Dr. Rupesh said, there are a lot of conditions. So for me, it depends. Or rather, if it's not to plant, we need to restore. If it's not to plant, we still need to restore. That's a safe answer, I hope. So basically for me, it's looking at the bigger picture. If you restore an area, mangroves can come naturally, and you can accelerate the colonization through planting or not. It's all right as long as the area is restored and they can come naturally. So basically, it depends.
Kadadoy?
Yes, I can say that yes, we need to plant more mangroves, not because it's not just for what I'm doing that for the ecosystem, but the current climate change also as very significant on this program, climate change mitigation adaptation, and we know to our colleague scientists that trees, especially mangrove, is one of how can we could mitigate the impact of the climate change. And aside, as Dr. Ma'am Agata said, it's depend upon, yes, but here in the Philippines, for instance, the more important here is we have more as currently we have more mangroves to plant if our really agency or government has to really work, because this time many of abandoned fish pond, I don't know what the status now. It's either a failure or tax deck. Then it is really abandoned. It's a lot of abandoned fish pond. But the problem, we cannot really move to plant this area because the status. Because I don't know if I correct me if I'm wrong, because our agency not really in our experience not really it's not really too much helping us as local community to plant this mangroves. What I'm asking only is just to clarify on this. If we are really abandoned and don't have not yet really have the owner is not interested, why not we bring back it or revert it into its original state, which is the mangroves? That's my point. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that, Kadodoy. And thank you so much to all our speakers, Dr. Rupesh, Ms. Agatha, and Kadodoy. It has been great hearing about the work and the insights of mangrove experts and scientists and practitioners and the importance and best practices of mangrove restoration. Thank you so much for an inspiring and thought-provoking discussion and for taking the time to be with us this afternoon. But before we end this session, I would like to take 2 minutes to invite everyone from Mindanao to join us in our chapter. And you may join us through this video. Once again, thank you so much to all our amazing audience for tuning in and engaging. And a big thank you again to our speakers for sharing your knowledge and expertise with us today. So you may check their websites and social media pages to check more of their work. So for the Center of International Forestry Research, or C4, and World Agroforestry ICRAF, you can follow them at C4_ICRAF and their website www.c4.org. For the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, their website is www.dnr.gov.ph. And for Kadodoy's organization, Kapunungan sa Gagmayng Mangingisda sa Concepcion in Zamboanga, Sibugay, they have a Facebook page, KGMC, or you may click on the link provided in our chat box. Also, don't forget to follow us if you want to know more about Oceanus Conservation's work. You could follow us in these different platforms, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, Oceanus Conservation. Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube is Oceanus Conservation. And on Instagram at Mangroves for Our Future. And you can also visit our website, oceanusconservation.org. Or if you have questions, you could email us at info@oceanusconservation.org. So we hope that today's discussions has inspired our audience to take action in conservation and restoration efforts in your local communities. Let's unite in making a positive impact for a sustainable future. Thank you for being a part of this global movement. Together for our planet. Have a great week ahead, everyone, and happy International Mangrove Day. Thank you, everyone.